All right, well, I'd love to get everybody's attention, please.
That's why I'm here.
So I think we've got some online people attending as well, which is great to see. Want to welcome everybody to, I think, really the first time we've had this kind of forum today. And excited to see so many people here in person. And I think we have over 20 or 30 people online too, which is great. So we'll try to do our best to work with those online. But we're also recording this, so if people can't stay the whole time or whatever, they'll be able to get a recording of this. So I'm First Selectwoman Peggy Lyons, and I think what we were trying to accomplish here, this is kind of a meeting actually of the Affordable Housing Committee, and then it invited guests of the Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning, because we all have to work together to tackle this very important issue for the town. Last year, the town went through a number of planning processes, the strategic plan process. One of the big issues that residents wanted us to address was affordable housing in Madison. And in addition to that, the Planning and Zoning Commission is going through their plan of conservation and development process. And part of what impacts affordable housing is our zoning. And then in addition, the Board of Selectmen 2 years or 18 months ago passed an affordable housing plan. So we did have some public forums then. And that plan, copies are available here in the room, but they're also available online. There were copies of the plan in here? Or,
there were copies.
They're all, okay, great. So hopefully people got that, but that was adopted by the Board of Selectmen about 18 months ago. Really gives some very interesting information on housing and living in Madison, and also some action items that our Affordable Housing Committee now is taking up the charge of implementing the Affordable Housing Plan. And what they will do is give recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and also Planning and Zoning on things that they think the town could do to make the housing situation better and to meet the needs of the community. So it's a lot. It's a big conversation, and we thought, let's just start having a conversation about this and maybe educating the public a little bit about what is affordable housing and what do we look at and what do we care about. So we've got some facilitators here who are experts in this area. They'll be joining us today. And I guess with that, I want to introduce Jen Gordon on the Board of Selectmen, who is the liaison. She's got a really lucky job, right?
Yeah.
She's the liaison for Planning and Zoning and the Affordable Housing Committee. And we thought that was important that we have somebody from our board who sees what's going on in both committees. And so she's going to give some welcoming remarks as well, and we'll move forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peggy. So yes, liaison to Affordable Housing Committee, Planning and Zoning Committee, and then also another one that really folds in nicely is our Senior Commission. So what we've been finding as I have been listening in to the meetings that our commission has been having is that we're finding in this process that in order for things to stay the same, right, there needs to be some changes that we make. There are some things that are outside of our control when it comes to housing. Maybe that's legislation, maybe that's market forces that are affecting the price of housing in the area. So what can we do as a community to make sure that things are progressing in a way that is beneficial to all of our Madison community members? So that's where we have kind of arrived at, as Peggy mentioned, back in 2022, when the Affordable Housing Plan was adopted by the town. And now our current group of affordable housing is looking for the best ways to implement the plan that was drafted by a separate committee. That brings us to where we are today. And that is hearing from our community members, your stories about what you're experiencing with housing, what you're finding a need for in the community, what things you like the way they are, what things you might want to see different. And the only way we as a town can be successful with implementing any sort of plan in town, it doesn't matter what it is to receive the feedback from our community members, because we need to make sure that we're reaching the needs of everybody here in town. And our boards and commissions, they all work very well together. I know that our Affordable Housing Committee has the support of our Planning and Zoning Committee and vice versa, and they're both going to be looking at our Plan of Conservation and Development and our strategic plan and our Affordable Housing Plan as they move forward with any recommendations that they bring to the Board of Selectmen. So I'd like now to take a moment to introduce David Fink. David Fink is a housing policy consultant, and he is working with the South Central Region Council of Governments. It's a whole big thing that we call SCROG. And he's worked with 21 municipalities over the years. He's also worked with developers and state government to help serve the affordable housing needs of individuals and families, the elderly, people who are experiencing homelessness. He has been a policy director for the Partnership for Strong Communities, and he is a statewide housing education and advocacy supporter for nonprofits. So if you would like, David, you want to come on up and maybe give us a little more information about what you do and how it's going to help us here in Madison.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Peggy. Good evening, thank you for inviting me. I am David Fink, and I'm a housing policy consultant for SCROG, which is South Central Region Council of Governments, which is, is New Haven and the 14 towns around it, including Madison. I've been helping them for about 5 years. I never, in all the work I did now and for the Partnership for Strong Communities, I never tell a town what to do. First of all, I don't know enough about any particular town. I don't know as much as you do. But even if I did, it's not my place. As Jen said, housing creation needs not to be top down, needs to be bottom up. It's got to be what the people in town want, what they think they need, where they want it. But it should be based on some education, understanding of housing creation. So what I'll try to do tonight is briefly, I'm told briefly, other people have to speak, give you an idea of where the housing market stands, where housing is in the state and the region, and some things to think about. And then we can go from there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The first thing I'd say is the interesting thing about housing is that no one thinks about it. I've always called it a tap water issue. I go into the bathroom in the morning to brush my teeth and wash my face, and I turn on the water and it's there, and I have no idea how it got there. Right? Housing's the same way. Most of us, every national and state poll I've ever read, people are satisfied with their housing situation. So they don't think about it. They've always been able to find a place that's appropriate for them and their family and that they can afford. That's changed. In 2010, the stars kind of aligned in a bad way because people my generation, baby boomers, suddenly reached the point, a lot of them, second largest wave of population the country's ever seen, reached the point where they wanted to downsize. Kids were gone, didn't want to shovel the snow, rake the leaves, any of that. So you're looking for a place to move. Meanwhile, our kids' generation, millennials, the biggest wave of population, started reaching the point where they're getting out of graduate school. And they were thinking, I don't really want a 4-bedroom colonial like my parents had with a nice picket fence. I don't want to shovel the snow or rake the leaves either. So they wanted what their downsizing parents wanted, multifamily housing. And the demand has been amazing since then. Now, it was accelerated by the pandemic. People starting to work at home. Suddenly, people had a 1-bedroom, wanted a second bedroom for an office, that sort of thing. Change it, but it really didn't change what was going to be coming anyway, and which has persisted. There's huge demand for multifamily housing, and they tell me I'm going to live till 90. Some days I don't feel like it, but the point is, we're going to be around, and our kids are going to be around a long time, and they want a different kind of housing option. Problem in Connecticut, you guys are not alone, is that most towns don't have the housing they need. Your town has a very, very large percentage, 92% of single-family homes. And that was great. While you and me and all of us were 20, 30, 40 years younger, but now we want something different, and our kids want something different. So what I tell you is, like I said, I don't tell any town what to do, but I will tell you what other towns are doing. They're all doing what you're doing. They're trying to understand what do they have, what do they need, where do they want to put it, who should build it, what should it look like? So with that in mind, let me point out that I know some of you may remember in the New York Times Magazine about 15 years ago, there was a piece that said, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. You know, how to get in line, how to say please, how to wait your turn. Well, everything you know, you need to know about housing, you kind of learned in Economics 101, and I'm sure most of you took it. It's supply and demand. If we don't have enough supply to meet the demand, we have a problem. Big problem in Connecticut. Consider these numbers. Since the beginning of the pandemic, single-family home prices have gone up statewide almost 60%. 60, not 16, 60. It's huge. Your median home price in Madison, the last I checked, was about over $600,000. Not a lot of people can afford that, right? The result of that increase in single-family prices pushed a lot of people at the lower end of the income spectrum out of the home buying market and into the rental market, driving up demand for, again, limited supply. And as a result, rental prices are up average statewide since the beginning of the pandemic, 20%. Now, there's some variation. Interestingly, the Norwich region went up about 32%, Fairfield County only 12%, but statewide about 20%. The ripple effect of that has been that pushed people out of the rental market into homelessness. In the last year, homelessness in Connecticut is up 13%. So, as Jen said, as Peg said, things are changing. We have to respond to the change. But as I hope you all know, tonight's meeting is a beginning. It's not an end. The change has to be shaped by the people in the town. Can't be top down. You all have to decide how to do it. So let me tell you a couple of other things. I'm going to show you some slides of how beautifully housing has been created, because a lot of people have the stereotype that housing is, affordable housing and income restricted housing, mixed income housing is the projects. It looks like Pruitt-Igoe or Cabrini Green or Father Panic Village. Not true. I'll show you those pictures in a second. And then I'll give you a few facts, and then I'll sit down and shut up, and someone else can go. Okay. So first off, I don't know how many of you are aware of United Way of Connecticut has something called its ALICE study. ALICE is an acronym, ALICE, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. These are households that we used to refer to as working poor. They're people who have jobs, work every day, work hard, but they can't save a lot of money. United Way has done this study in about 15 states around the country. And the income limits are surprising. It's $39,000 for an individual survival budget. You got to make $39,000 just to afford enough food and housing and transportation and healthcare and the other things you need. $39,000. Family household of four, it's now over $120,000 because Connecticut is an expensive state. Well, get this, 23% of the households in Madison are ALICE households. They're largely invisible. We don't see them. They go to work. They're our neighbors. We don't realize it. They're people who we need in town. You need in town. We all need in every town. They're the people who cut your hair, cut your lawn, make your latte, take care of grandpa so he can age your place at home and not have to go into a nursing home. They're people we called essential workers during the pandemic who we celebrated. We all put signs on the lawn and said, we need these people. And, well, they need a place to live that they can afford. So that's something to think of. 23% are ALICE households here. Okay, so they need housing. Where are we going to put it? I don't know. You're going to have to decide that. That's really up to you and what you're going to build and what it's going to look like. Okay. But first, you need to know a few things before I show you these photos, what's true and what's false. A lot of towns are held back by stereotypes they've seen on TV and in the movies. They think that mixed income housing is ugly. Like I said, we'll see pictures in a minute. They think that if you build multifamily housing, you're going to get hordes of school children flooding the schools. Well, that's not true. And there's research to show it's not true. And there's anecdotal evidence of many developments around the state that indicate it's not true. But I'll give you a quick rundown on that. Rutgers did the study back in the early 2000s that showed a one-bedroom multifamily apartment produces 0.04 public school age children for every 100 one-bedroom units. In other words, 4 for every 100. Think about it. Makes sense. How many parents are going to live in a one-bedroom apartment with a child? Not many. I've seen it one time in 22 years. Two-bedroom unit, 0.27, or in other words, 1 public school age child for every 4 two-bedroom units. Again, makes sense. Two-bedroom units are going to be 2 singles sharing, or a young couple who wants a second bedroom as an office and for guests. Grandma who wants a bedroom for the grandkids when they come visit. And 1 out of 4 times will be a parent and a child. 3-bedroom unit, you start to get more, 1.38. But you don't get a lot of school kids. I understand you're going to be talking to a guy named Mark Barnhart, who's the Economic and Community Development Director in Fairfield. For 15 years, Fairfield has asked the school committee in Fairfield, because they're producing a lot of units, how many kids are you getting? They get 0.13 public school age kids for every multifamily unit they create. So again, you've heard it. You're not to be blamed for believing it, because people say it all the time. Oh, you produce multifamily housing, you have a lot of school age kids. No, you don't. Second, MIT did a study back in 2008 that said multifamily mixed income housing lowers neighboring property values. Not true. And again, you can ask the assessors in a lot of towns that have created it, doesn't have it. I admit, you put a 20-story apartment building in a single-family neighborhood, some people may not want to live there, but you're not going to do that. So you want housing that's going to fit its surroundings. Okay. Crime. No studies, but anecdotally, we'll show you pictures that were taken in real time. You don't see crime in mixed income housing. And the police, call any police chief and mayor, first selectman you want. The cops aren't there every night. There's no graffiti on the walls. There's no use syringes on the ground. It's a canard. But I understand people believe it. And here's the point, and this is why the town has to continue to discuss this, because it's not unreasonable for any of you or any of your neighbors, it's not irrational for you to worry about those things. Because the biggest check any of you ever signed was for that home. Maybe some of you wrote a bigger check, but unlikely, right? And so everything's tied up in that home. Your family's security, your children's education, your retirement nest egg. So you would be stupid to not worry about who was moving in down the block. So nobody can be blamed for that, and you shouldn't blame your neighbors for worrying about that. What you should do is make sure you continue to have these forums so that they can all express their fears and concerns and get their questions answered. Because until they get their questions answered and they feel that they have been heard, they're not going to listen to anyone else. So it's reasonable for them to be fearful, and it's reasonable for all of you to entertain their concerns. So that's why this has to be the first meeting, not the last meeting, and you have to have more of that. Let me show you some pictures, and I'll try to point out what these look like. I'm going to sit over here for a minute so I can see what you're all seeing. Okay, yeah, I think this is,
East River Farms.
yeah, in your town. I don't know the ones in your town. This is in Guilford, called Covered Woods. It's single-family homes built by NeighborWorks New Horizons, actually, which was then headed by Salem Mosquera Bruno, who's now the state's housing commissioner. This is in New Canaan, built by the Housing Authority of New Canaan, 1 and 2 bedroom units. Again, I took these pictures to point out largely just how nicely designed some of these structures are. Aaron? This is an Avon built by a guy named Jeff Sager, who we had at our housing work group meeting yesterday. This is, interestingly enough, built on a former industrial property that was rezoned. Those are good candidates sometimes for building mixed income housing. Sometimes not so much, because industrial properties either have environmental issues or they're in neighborhoods where heavy trucks are running in and out and it's not safe. But sometimes those are good places to rezone. This is in Stonington, also built by Salem Mosquera Bruno when she was at NeighborWorks New Horizons. Stonington has done a lot of good work on housing creation. Again, another kind of upper middle class community, but they need the people who need this kind of housing. This one
Concord
is in your
Meadows.
town, yeah.
This is the majority. Senior and disabled housing in town.
And this was built in the late 70s.
Yes.
This was built also by Jeff Sager from Metro Realty, Heritage Glen in Farmington. We talk about the people who need mixed income housing. This is about a mile from Yukon Health Center. And you have lab techs and interns and medical students living there. It's a great community, and single entry with nice little patios and some duplexes. And interestingly enough, this picture was taken about 5 years ago. They've redone it. Some developers like Metro have their own property management firms. And so they believe they don't just build it and leave. They believe it's an asset that if they keep up to date, they'll be invited back. And Farmington actually has been invited back 6 times by Metro Realty and is now approaching 10% income restricted units that are about to be immune from the 830G statute, which I can explain later. This is in Brookfield. They had a very large parcel and they were able to go up 3 stories or 4 stories in some cases. Again, nicely done. This is a converted nursing home in Darien. Again, the advantage to repurposing already built structures sometimes is the density is already there. You don't have to build it, and people are used to looking at the density. You don't have to create it. Some buildings, though, that are repurposed are not good candidates, though, because the footprint is not right, the utilities are not in the right places, and sometimes there are environmental issues, particularly with old builds or factory buildings. But sometimes you can do it. This is senior housing in South Windsor. That's another. I don't think Metro built that, but Metro has invited, or South Windsor has invited Metro back 5 times into South Windsor. But this is senior housing in South Windsor. This is in Fairfield, right on the Bridgeport line, done by Garden Homes. These are all 1-bedroom units. And actually, this is the one place where I saw a 1-bedroom unit with a mother and child living there. So it's real, it's the only place. This is an interesting development. Some of you may have passed it. It's on the Merritt Parkway in Wallingford, just south of whatever they're calling the Oakdale Theater now. These are on a 26-acre parcel, 80 single-family homes, all about 1,500 or 1,600 square feet. They're actually freestanding condos, so the people who own them are able to landscape and otherwise take care of a periphery around the home, and then the Wallingford Housing Authority takes care of the rest of the property and all the common areas. And again, this was built 20 years ago. I took this photo last year. It was done by a quality builder, Liz Verna, and it's been well taken care of. And that's something that really has to happen. You have to have good property management after nicely built stuff is built. This is in Norwalk. I'm not familiar with this one, so I don't know, Erin, if you know anything about this one.
It was in your slides.
It's in my slides? Well,
Looks like Sona.
it's like I had 3 children, but I didn't know what they were doing all the time either, so. Yeah, or this one, but looks nice. That's, I think, the same one.
Yeah, that's South Norwalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is in Orange on a former old trailer park, and just built by a woman named Carol Martin, who we had at Scrog yesterday. It's 46 units. 10 of them are for people with developmental disabilities. All of those first floor entrances are, and all those units are accessible for people in wheelchairs. It's really, again, nicely designed, and some of them are 2- and 3-story townhomes. And I think we have a few other photos of those that developed. Oh, no, this one is 36 townhomes done by Bob Wiedemann in Wallingford. Again, first floor entrances for all of them. Also, this is what's called a friendly 830G proposal. In other words, the town of Wallingford understood that their affordable housing stock was under 10%, that they were going to lose in court if they tried to fight it. So rather than fight it, they turned it into a friendly 830G where they worked with the developer, fire department, police department, make sure there was ingress and egress for fire apparatus, etc. And he's built a really nice product there. These are some single-family homes that Bob Wiedemann is also building. And again, I think there'll be 14 on the parcel, and 5 of them will be income restricted. Is that it?
That's the last
Okay.
one.
All right. So now that I've told you what not to believe, let me just give you a few facts, and then we can finish up. Housing is the largest single expense in the average budget, 32%. Transportation is second, 19%. If you put the housing within a half-mile walking distance of mass transit, the 19% goes down to 9%. So people will take that leaves them more discretionary income for food, clothing, more housing, whatever. So if you can put housing near transit, whether it's a bus line or train station, that's a good idea. Affordable homes. What does it mean? A lot of people ask me, what is affordable housing? I don't mean to beg the question when I say it's housing people can afford. What that means is, though, they shouldn't have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. My folks, when I got my first apartment, said, don't spend more than 25% of your monthly income on housing. I think all of our folks told us that, right? HUD says 30%, because you have to have 70% left over for all your other necessities, food, clothing, transportation, healthcare. Okay, so that's what it means. Unfortunately, in the state, 48% of renters, 32% of homeowners are burdened by their housing costs. That means they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. That's a problem for them. It's also a problem for local merchants because these people have less discretionary income to buy what they need. It's bad for the state because if the state is looking to collect sales tax revenue, these people don't have a lot of money left over to buy stuff. So you don't want people spending too much money on housing if you can help it. The housing wage, what is that? In Connecticut, it is $31.93 an hour. This is a calculation, again, by the National Income Housing Coalition, basically says this is what you have to earn an hour to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment in Connecticut, $31.93. That translates, I'm not quick on the math, so I I thought I did a translation here, but you can figure it out. $32 an hour times 40 hours a week times 52 weeks. And I think it gets up in the area of over $60,000.
70 something.
Yeah, which when you think about it is really interesting, right? $70,000 for an individual used to be a lot of money. It's not anymore. And I don't know about you guys. I used to have perspective. I lost perspective on that because I don't think we realize that the person who makes your latte in the morning or the person who comes to cut your lawn, doing important jobs, taking care of kids at a daycare center, they don't make that much money. And you have to remember that if you need those people in town, they have to have a place to live. And here's the point. CBIA statewide and lots of chambers of commerce are now enlisting their local merchants and small business people because those people can't find labor. They have a lot of jobs that are going unfilled. And the reason for that is that if you run a small business, and I'm sure some of you do, your margins are pretty tight. You can't afford to raise wages to attract labor, especially from 4 or 5 towns away. Because if that guy can find a job in his hometown, why is he going to drive 5 towns over to Madison and waste his time and his gas money to do that? And that's the problem that a lot of employers are having these days. So if you want labor pool and you want that guy to not have to raise his prices or maybe go out of business, he needs to have labor that he can afford to pay. So it's good for the town. What are the other reasons? I should also point out, like I said, if you want that healthcare aide to take care of grandpa so he doesn't have to go into the home, you need housing for that aide in town because that aide isn't driving 4 towns over either. Okay. Other reasons towns created. Like a lot of you, I'm sure you do it because it's the right thing to do. Everyone needs a place that they can afford that's appropriate for them. But it's in the town's interest to do this also. If 98% of the town's revenue comes from the property tax, develop the property. I had lunch with a guy named Mark Barnhart from Fairfield today, who's their community economic development director and oversees their housing creation. They've created so many units, they're getting $7,000 in property taxes on average for every multifamily unit they've created. That's pretty good return on development. So for towns that don't want to have to raise the mill rate, creating housing is important. Mark Twain said, invest in land God's not creating anymore. Well, guess what? Towns can create more, not horizontally, vertically, go up 2 or 3 stories. Not everywhere, but where it's appropriate, where it fits the surroundings. Okay, so it's in the interest of towns to create more property tax revenue, provide more customers for merchants and labor pool for employers, allow baby boomers, like we said, to downsize, elderly to remain in the town that they've just spent 30 or 40 years raising their kids in, allowing their adult children to come home or come over for dinner on Sunday night, not just for Christmas and Easter. Attract younger workers and families to come live in town because they're the ones who volunteer to coach the Little League team and do other stuff in town, not the older people. I don't volunteer anymore in my town. Allow your teachers, public safety, staff to live in town. I gather, I made this bet 100 times. I wish I'd actually bet money that most of the people in towns like yours who work in town hall couldn't afford to live in town. And I always bet that the majority of your town workers and school staff don't live in town. Well, guess what? I don't know about your town workers, but I've been told that your school staff and teachers, majority of them live out of town. If you want them to be here, that's up to you. And finally, repurpose buildings. Like I said, you can take old office buildings, you can take other buildings. Interesting fact, and I'll leave you with this. When we were helping the consultant from Boston, Scott, to write and help draft your affordable housing plans in the region, I drove him around your town and all the other towns. You wanted to see them. we passed one of those, you've seen them, 50s, 60 era strip malls. You've all seen them, 6, 8 stores, right? And when you drive by them, time has passed them by. You know, half of the storefronts are vacant. So I said to him, has anybody thought about repurposing those? He said, not only that, he said, but the regional planning agency around the Boston area had done a study and found, they have 73 towns in their region, that if they repurposed and turned just 10% of the old strip malls in the Boston area towns into housing, they could create 120,000 units of housing. Okay. That's the way, as you discuss this going forward and look around your town, don't look at it necessarily as it is, look at it as it could be. What could we put there? Those old strip malls are on commercial strips or they're on bus lines. Those are places you go up to the guy who owns that property and say, when the leases are up on those other 3 stores, how about if we rezone this for multifamily housing? And maybe he says yes, maybe he says no, but maybe he says yes. So think about what's there, but not necessarily that it always has to be there. You can use industrial sites, you can use and repurpose older buildings, you can knock down sometimes what's there and build something new. I know I could answer a lot more questions. I probably raised more than I've answered already, but I'll sit down now and turn it over to Ben and or back to Jen and be happy to stay and answer questions.
Yeah, no, it's Mark's
Oh,
turn
Mark,
now.
okay.
I'm Mark Edmiston. I've lived in Madison for over 20 years. I'm retired. And I'm going to introduce our members of our committee who are your neighbors. We are people who decided that there were issues that had to be addressed. And that's one of the reasons why we're having a meeting tonight, is that we need people to share with us their feelings about what we're doing and give us some direction as we move ahead. The past year, we were actually appointed back in the January of 2023. And at that point, we didn't know a lot. And so we spent about a year learning. We brought people in to talk to us. We did our own research. We've gone to visit other places. We've worked with SCROG to understand a little bit more about the bigger issues. We've been able to work with Ben and David Fink to learn more again. So we felt at this point in time, after this year of learning, if you will, that it was time to get more feedback. We had started having meetings around town. We've had some small meetings we've had with different groups around town, but we wanted to really have a kind of a more extensive conversation with people and not just to be looking at people in one particular setting, a church, for example, or a community organization. We are going to be working over the next year to expand our outreach. So, for example, and you may make a note of that if you want to have more issues or questions you want to bring up on our meeting. We meet twice a month. And our meeting on March 20th is going to be an open meeting. And we invite anybody who wants to come to talk a little bit more about this again in maybe a smaller group where people might be more comfortable expressing some of their own feelings. So with that sort of in mind, I would like to start introducing my members of my committee. Francine Larson is our vice chair.
Let's just stand up.
I think so they can see you. That's all. Maybe you can stand in your chair.
Hi, I'm Francine Larson. I lived in Madison for 20 years, almost August of '04. I'm also retired, was a pediatric nurse and attorney. And I did previously serve on planning and zoning for 10 years, but I've been off of that since 2017. And thought, when I found out that they were going to have an affordable housing committee, that was something that I was interested in participating in. As David has said, there's a lot of ways that maybe it can happen. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Perfect. Thank you. Bennett Goodwin. Bennett, please stand.
Hi there, I'm Bennett Pugland. I'm a newbie in town. I've only been here 16 years. I served 8 years on the Board of Finance a while ago. And Mark asked me just to share with you some of what I've heard in these small groups. I've been to 8 of them now. And we've had maybe a total of about 120 folks. And the things that David said to you are the things that were most commonly raised in those community meetings. One of the most important one, I think, was a lot of folks, and most of the folks were older, like my age, said we were really lucky to get here. You know, it was just a combination of things that enabled us to buy at the right time. Maybe we sold a home somewhere else and land prices hadn't gone totally crazy yet. But the problem is our kids who went to school here and love this town can't afford to live here. And it breaks our heart. And there's nothing we can do. We don't have enough to help them. That was probably the most common thing we heard. The other thing we heard was from elderly folks who really, really want to stay here. You know, they built this town with their taxes and their volunteer labor, and but they're in the family home and they're rattling around in a home that had 2 or 3 kids, and they're all alone. And increasingly, the elderly are widows, you know, because they outlive their husbands, and so instead of 2 people struggling to maintain a home that's too big, you've now got 1 person. And their universal plea is, we need somewhere to move to. And of course, that would open up bigger homes for new families to move in. And I guess the last thing I want to share with you is also something David talked about a lot, and that is folks really want to see the people who keep Madison the kind of town we moved here for, able to live here. And they particularly talk about teachers and public safety. Right? And I don't want to bore you with more statistics, but I can tell you that 75% of the town and Board of Education employees would qualify for affordable housing. And the state definition of that would be earning under $90,000 a year. So that used to be a lot of money, as David said. And that includes, you know, so that 75% includes all of the patrol officers in town. And it includes about a third, no, I'm sorry, 2/3 of all the teachers. So if we want those folks to be, you know, really connected to the community, be part of that engagement, they don't live here, and they don't because they can't afford to. So thank you.
Thank you, Bennett.
Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Eric Rexman is here.
So Eric Ratchman, I lived in town twice now. First time for about 10 years, then we left, came back for 2 years, about 2 years ago. Why did we come back? We came back because it's a great community and because it has great schools for our kids. We have 2 teenagers. But if you go to those schools, there's declining enrollment. And how do you continue to provide all the great programs our schools do, AP classes, et cetera, that our kids take advantage of? Well, as the schools get smaller and smaller, you can't continue to invest in them. So that I saw that as an issue, as a problem. We previously had some rental homes in town. I saw families or young people or hardworking singles struggling to find a place to live. And, you know, and there's so few options for them. We never, ever had a vacancy because there were always people waiting on the list to find a place to live. And there was just nothing affordable. And I have a mother-in-law who's single, retired in her mid-70s, living in a house by herself. There are no options in this town for her to go to, right? I mean, there just aren't. And on our street, we have multiple widows, all living in 3,000 plus square foot homes. Where do they go? They love the community. There isn't an option in this community. So I see these problems. That's why I wanted to get involved. That's why I'm here. And I care deeply about this community. Continuing to make it great.
Anthony Eplow.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anthony Eplow. We live in town 27 years now and coming up from New York City. And we fell in love with this town. We raised 3 children, went through the school system. They've done incredibly well. But like what was mentioned, could one of my kids come back here and live here right now? You know, they're all college grads doing well out of state, and that's wouldn't be our dream, right? And another thing that too, like where we raised the kids in a single family home, we don't need it. We don't need that much room anymore. We love the downsides. We love this town, want to stay. And right now we can't. It'd be crazy to downsize because where would we go? We lose the equity in our house. So that's why I volunteered for this committee. It's a really noble cause. And as you heard, there's a lot of need for it. So thank you.
Thanks. Peter Meyer in the back there? Yeah, so Peter Meyer's in the back.
Peter Meyer, I live on Summer Hill. I've been here 28 years, and I think I'm the oldest member of the committee, which I really take glory in. I see a lot of familiar faces I've been acquainted with or know a lot of people in the room. It's a community. We're a community. And for Madison to move ahead and grow, we've really got to pull the community together to let people live here that want to live here, that need to live here, that work here. I'm all in and have been all in since the start.
Thank you. And behind Jane and Ari.
Hi, I'm Jane Scenario. I'm probably the newest resident in Madison from this group. I've only been here almost 5 years. I came, like Anthony, from New York City, from a place where there's very diverse housing. So when I came here, one of the first places my husband and I went out to eat, because we had 2 dogs, was Brother Mike's, and we could bring our dogs and sit outside. And, we like to get to know people, and we were talking to the waitress, and we just had a conversation with her, and she said, "Oh, are you moving here?" And I said, "Yeah, we're hoping to." We were looking at houses at the time. It's probably about 2018 or so. And she said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Well, gee, do you live here too?" And she said, "Oh, no, I could never live here. I could never afford to live here." And I was like, wow. And, I had never heard anything like this because I came from New York City where, people live and work in the city. And there's a lot of diversity there. So my background is housing analytics, ironically, and I come from a finance background. And when I came into town, I said to my husband, I want to do something for the village or the town. People always say, "Oh, it's not a village," but where I could leverage my background. So then I was looking at various commissions that they were looking for volunteers for, and affordable housing came up, and I said, that's it. So I'm happy to be here. I met some wonderful people on my team, and I'm so happy to see so many people here this evening because it is an important subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I mean, I think the one thing in just inclusion that you can see from the variety of people that are here in our committee, we don't have one mind about it. We also don't have one agenda. We're not trying to try to do something to you. And what we want to do is to listen and to try to learn and to try to be able to manage the change that's happening. And I think that David made the point why we're on the committee, I think, is because we understand that's true. Madison is changing, whether we want it or not. And that's just the way life is. Things don't remain the same forever. We want to be able to help manage that change. And with your help, we can do it. So thank you.
My turn?
Yes, David. You're right.
All good.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay if I'm sitting down?
Yep.
Great. And I'll occasionally try to address you all back here a little bit, but so my name is Ben Fink. I'm son of David Fink. I grew up.
Don't blame me.
Wait a minute. Really?
Yeah, right.
You guys- oh,
Grew up right. I got from him. I think my voice, we sound similar, and my questionable sense of humor, and ideally some kind of commitment to public life. Thank you, Father. Grew up in West Hartford. Cannot afford to live in West Hartford. Live in Philadelphia. Have done work. Unlike my father, I'm not a housing policy expert. What I have kind of fallen into working and living in a lot of communities from Minnesota to Kentucky to Austria, is making it possible for people, making it possible for people who didn't necessarily think they shared any common ground to find some, right? And was working in Kentucky before, during, and after the 2016 election, and did major community development projects, including an alternative energy with people who voted for both candidates and had a lot of different feelings about coal, which was part of the economy there, an important part for a long time. And I was telling my father about this work, and he said, we could use that here in Connecticut, talking about housing, because people have got a lot of feelings about it. and a lot of feelings in a lot of different directions. And that's real and that's valid. And, through doing this work in Madison, we got folks here in Guilford working together, got folks in Wallingford. Don't think there's any other towns I'm working with that are here tonight, but doing this probably in about 10 or 15 towns across South Central Connecticut and the Naugatuck Valley right now in different ways. And what I'm doing specifically is making it possible for people to come together, share experiences, and discover common ground. And out of this, I think we've heard tonight, I was thinking about this, 3 truths that if they're not self-evident, they're at least, I think, pretty evident, right? Number 1, as we keep hearing, is change is coming one way or the other. And to keep things the same that we like, we need to proactively make some changes. Otherwise, change is going to happen in ways we don't like. Either change in terms of housing development coming in that we don't like, or change coming in as development not happening and the population dwindling, schools dwindling, tax base dwindling, community dwindling, right? So no change is not an option one way or the other. Number 2 is, as we've heard, as Bennett just talked about, there's a lot of people in this community who can't afford to live in this community. People who work here, parents, children, etc. And the third truth, which I think sometimes people who care about affordable housing and affordable housing development can forget about, is that doesn't matter what your position is on housing or any other political issue, I have never met a human being who is happy to have a stranger come into their house and rearrange the furniture in their living room without consent. And unfortunately, a lot of housing advocates sometimes sound that way to people living in a town. Sound like, you are doing this bad. You are doing this wrong. You've got to do what I say because I have all this knowledge and all these charts, and I don't really care that you care about your community as it is, right? And those are, as my father was saying before, valid concerns for all kinds of reasons. And so this is why we've come together, a whole bunch of conversations in Madison and surrounding towns, because this isn't just a Madison issue, to make it possible for people to share their experiences. And after sharing their experiences and finding out common ground of those experiences, then we're set up to start talking about the more difficult questions, the more difficult misunderstandings, and starting to come to some consensus around policy. So some people that have been involved in those conversations are here tonight, and I'm going to ask for some of those people to share their experiences. We also want to hear other people's experiences who have not yet gotten a chance to be part of those conversations, because the reason we're here is we want, and specifically the Housing Committee, backed by the Select Board, Planning and Zoning, the rest of the town government, want to make this change in a way that works for everybody, right? Is everybody going to get what they want? Probably not, right? But we want everybody to be heard. And we want everybody, as much as we can, to, even if we don't get everything we want, to feel fundamentally like, okay, this is something I can live with. This is something that feels right. This is something that I have a voice in. And not just tonight, but want to make clear this meeting is the beginning of a process. Or I would actually say kind of, maybe I would say this meeting is the end of the beginning, right? That we've been doing this work for about a year, but there's a lot more to go, right? We want to hear from everybody, hear questions, hear concerns. We will not respond to every question and concern in this room in the next half hour or even 32 minutes, but we will respond over time. The committee is working at follow-up meetings. We already talked about the one that's going to be on March 20th. We'll talk right at the end of the meeting tonight about next steps and ways that you can get involved, stay involved, bring and invite other neighbors to be involved in the days, weeks, and months to come, including a little more about that meeting. There will also be newsletters coming out, regular newsletters from the committee. There's a website that's up where more information is going to come out. We want to, and the whole point is for the recommendations of the Housing Committee for implementing the town affordable housing plan to be as responsive to as many community voices, perspective, concerns, interests, wants, needs, desires as possible. And so tonight is about sharing and gathering more of that information and understanding where we're coming from so that we can build this together and make the change we need to make in order to make it work for everybody as best we can. So with that, would love to hear, maybe starting with a few people who've been involved in these conversations that Bennett and others were talking about, some of your experiences, some of your stories, your reflections about getting a home, keeping a home, struggling to find a home, people in your life who want to find a home and have a home and keep a home here. And then we'll open it up to hearing from other people in the room, your experiences. And then finally, we'll take some time for specific questions, concerns, et cetera, that again, we won't address at length tonight, but we will address in the time to come. And you can hold us to that, right? In these follow-up meetings. By all means, show up, talk to us before you leave, get contact info, get involved. The more involvement from the more people we've got, the better. So I'm going to open it up now to ask some people to share their experiences of themselves and people they care about in getting a home, keeping a home, finding a home in Madison. And then we'll open it up to everybody. And what we just ask is share anything you like. Just share it from your own experience, right? Share it because when we stop sharing from our experiences, that's where misinformation can happen, right? That's where stereotypes can happen. That's where, social media feeds and punditry and other stuff. And really, this is not about other people over there. This is about us in this room and the people who live near us, work with us, we interact with on a daily basis. So again, share anything you like. Just please share from your own experience. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Phil Chamberlain. I moved here in 1972. And unlike Peter, I probably won't tell you how many years so you can figure it out math-wise. I've had the unique experience to have 3 businesses in town. And one was a furniture business. Another was managing condos for almost 20 years between Clinton and Madison. And the other one was renovating older homes, of which I bought one in 1982 that was literally falling to the ground at 362 Durham Road. And it was a non-conforming use back then. And the town fathers encouraged me, even though it had some limited commercial use, to possibly make that into residential use. And so I bought the building and renovated the whole thing with the help of the field company and made it into 4 apartments ultimately. But it has been many things over the years. It started as a rental for Bruce McIntyre, who had his, was a business in their sales business for awards and things like that. I had a man in there that was selling latex mattresses, another sales unit. And I had a lady who did nails for a while until I found out the insurance company didn't like that very much. So, and a number of other commercial things. And so finally talking with zoning officers and whatnot, and with the dilemma we had with traffic up on Route 79 and Green Hill Road, which many of you probably know hasn't got the best reputation, but I think it's improving with the new lighting system, although I don't know where the walkway's going that they put in, but that'll be interesting. At any rate, so I sort of thought about the future at that point. I still had a business downtown, and I said, the way it's going, there aren't a whole lot of rentals around even back then. And I had a lady come to me that was in desperation. Her husband had died accidentally, and she had 2 children that she had to keep living north of Green Hill Road in order to stay in the proper school. And I said, well, look, I've got a building right now. I haven't done anything, with about 2/3 of it. We'll make part of it an apartment upstairs. So made an apartment, got her 2 children and herself in there, and they finished 3 years of school. And I had 2 other ladies that needed the same kind of help. So it just sort of word of mouth happened. And then it went from there to some single people that worked in the area, and they heard that I had an apartment available, and I said, sure. So it became 4 apartments, to make a long story short, and of which I had lived down on Tuxas Road, I had lived on Opening Hill Road, I had lived over my business down on Bradley Road for a while. I finally moved to one of the apartments myself because I enjoy doing the work on the building. It is my home. And over the last, I would say 15 years, I've really come to appreciate that seniors would like to stay in town. And I said, I'm going to make this as much as I can for older folks that would like to stay. And that was my first choice. And right now, there's 4 seniors in the building. I'm one of them. And I have to say, I've had some wonderful people come and go over the years, always helped to make a community, to make a small community. And not that, on the other hand, everyone has privacy because we're all respectful of each other. And I've gotten nothing but compliments ever since I redid it in 1983 from actually selectmen and others that would drive by almost every day. And people would constantly say to me, what do you do there? I said, well, we live there. And it's a building right next to the Madison Flower Shop. So a lot of you may know the building, maybe you don't. We now have 2 residential buildings that one's going up across the street on the other corner of Green Hill and Route 79. There's one more that's going in next to that one. So it's really what I am is a non-conforming use in a residential area. And that's what the building has always been. But I would say that I've had nothing but good experiences since, this thing became rental property one way or the other since 1983. And the other thing I've had that I've enjoyed is trying to make it look nice as a building that people pass entering into Madison. I wanted it to look like Madison. And I'd like more of the area that I'm in to be more welcoming. So that's sort of my neighborhood push up there, and could use all the help that I could get. But I think we're doing pretty well. I think the other thing we've done is to take away a traffic problem that could have been turned into a commercial use, and we made it a light residential use. So I think that was a good thing for that particular corner and that street concern up there. So I guess my point is that I know a couple of other buildings in town that the same thing has been done to. And generally, people are very quiet, they go about their business. And if the landlord lives there, usually things are pretty well kept. Okay, now, I tell my tenants or people that apply, I said, look, the good thing is I live here and I'm here to do whatever needs to be done to make you comfortable and for you to consider it your home. I said, on the other hand, I live here. And I said, there are rules of the house. So I've tried to create a community, and I have found people have responded, and they've been very happy, and they've come and gone. So I've had younger people knocking at the door and asking lately, as well as seniors that want to stay in town. That's just a little story that maybe you haven't heard.
Thanks very much. Please.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good evening. Yeah, my name's Bob. I'm a relatively new resident to the area. We moved here 3 years ago from Norwalk, Connecticut. After I retired, I was working in New York. Once I retired, the proximity to the city wasn't important, so we moved here towards the tail end of the pandemic. It was a very difficult experience moving at that point in time.
Did the same
No matter
thing.
who you were dealing with. What's that? And Linda was my wonderful realtor.
All right.
So yeah, I just have a couple, so it was
Sure.
very difficult. We did a lot of research initially. We wanted to move. I wanted to move to Florida,
Yep.
something on the ocean, but my girlfriend, too far from the grandkids. So basically, we, did some research, looked at the demographics, the median income, and let's face it, obviously Madison's not an inexpensive town. If I'm not mistaken, the average median income is about $103,000. So it's certainly up there in the top in the state. So I guess I have a couple, so it was difficult. We love it here. Everyone's so friendly and welcoming. So I just did have a couple quick questions. and I'll
Sure.
finish with my comments.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, housing that's deemed affordable, does that make that eligible for Section 8 vouchers?
Mhm.
It does.
Yeah, we're gonna, not necessarily. I was saying, because like I said, we're gonna record the questions tonight. We're not gonna be able to respond to all
So
of them.
nobody has knowledge of whether or not something that's affordable.
You can't have Section 8 right now. And that's
You
not,
what?
that Section 8 is not.
Okay, because also as an experience as a landlord, both in Stratford and in Bridgeport, a multifamily unit and a rental property I owned that I rented out. I found I had watched progressively the quality of life at the condo in Stratford deteriorate
Right.
with the approval of Section 8 vouchers. But anyway, make long story short. So the other thing I was going to say, and what most concerns me, I certainly understand that affordable housing is a crisis throughout the country. And it's unfortunate when you have a public servant, when you have a police officer or a teacher can't afford to live in town. I just don't think that it's reasonable to expect that we should be able to provide affordable housing for, let's say, a stop and shop worker or a barista in Starbucks. So in other words, I just don't think we moved to Madison for a reason. And that was to experience the experience that we now have in Madison. So the one thing that concerns me a little bit, can anyone just speak to the criteria? Obviously, if you have 10 new units of affordable housing, okay, they're going to be cheaper than the average market price. If you have 100 applicants for 10 units, what criteria are used to determine who's going to be allowed to rent those units? Criteria, age.
Somebody,
Yeah, I'd like to.
Mark, please.
I think that's a policy question, number one. And number two, that's a very big issue. I mean, there's a number of towns around the state and also around the country. That, for example, there's a school district that decided they wanted their teachers to be close by. So they actually, on the school property, they built housing preference to the thing.
That's
Doesn't
great.
mean that's the only people who could move there, but the preference is to people who have certain qualifications. And then if you go beyond that, but that's part of the process that we're going through right now, is just talk about those kinds of things. And the idea of, you bring up Section 8, I mean, we're not set up to do Section 8 housing
Okay.
in town, so, yeah. And I don't think it's anything in the plans to.
So I guess what I'm asking, who ultimately makes the decision if is there a lottery, if there's 100 people?
Each
buying?
property is determined by the property owner. So if you have, for example, the housing that's being built right now, affordable housing that's being built right now down at the end of College Road.
Yes.
College Road. There's a firm that runs that, and they will set their own criteria. And they have to conform to the state criteria in terms of income and such like that. But
I understand the income criteria.
Last question, then I want to make room for other
Okay,
folks.
thank you.
Thank you. And these are things, just to say, because this is to the larger point, these are the specifics of policy that are gonna be worked out in the coming months. And so this is great input to hear what are people's priorities. And so a lot of the answer to these questions is, we're figuring it out, but this is great input. Other people have, Cal, I see ya.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak. Thanks. And Dave, it's really nice to see both of you in Madison tonight. For individuals here who do not know, my name is Calvin Price. And as luck would have it, I do live in the town of Madison. And I've been in Madison since 1982. So you can do the math. And I'm encouraged to see by seeing so many individuals here to address the issue of affordable housing. And I would like to share with you two stories. First being the story of Old Saybrook and Ferry Crossing. And you might not be aware of the development in Old Saybrook, which is Ferry Crossing. And I can recall when we started that initiative out there in Old Saybrook, it started just like this, conversation. And I think the challenge you face is the education and advocacy. And the more you know about what affordable housing is, the more comfortable you will get. But by not having the knowledge and understanding the education, you have fears, you have doubts, you have concerns, just like the gentleman raised over here about Section 8. Section 8 is a whole different housing model. He raised a question about who gets in, and how do you run the lottery, and who is qualified. All of those are done by the owner of the development. You can have individuals like David alluded to, as far as Alice goes. Those individuals typically are at the 25 to 30% of affordable housing models. You can go to 40%, 50%. You have veterans that's going to housing developments at 50 to 60%. When we looked at our project in Old Saybrook, we were able to get all of those individuals into those units. It's a 32-unit development. If you were to ride out here today and look at that development, you would not be able to tell why that is affordable and how nice it's kept. And it's owned by a nonprofit group. The nonprofit group that owns that development is the name of Hope Partnership. You might have heard of Hope Partnership because, as luck would have it, they have offices where the Essex Savings Bank is on Durham Road. You might have heard about them because they're doing an affordable housing project in the town of Madison. When you go to Cottage Road, 131, right behind Windermere, the town has made a commitment. The town, First Selectmen's, Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning has all agreed that that would be a development. That will be a 32-unit development there. It will afford affordable housing. It will have market rate units, and it will be completed by the end of this year. We anticipate that that facility will have individuals in there starting fourth quarter. If you arrive past it today, you will see that the market rate units have already been occupied. That development was started 3 or 4 years ago. And we're fortunate enough to have an individual that believed in the Hope organization. And they really believed because they were able to finance us, to carry the mortgage for a period of time that allowed for us to put the whole deal together. If you had the opportunity to work with nonprofit groups, it takes a little longer to get the money, primarily because you have to work with a lot of quote developers. If you ride past that development and you look at the sign and they talked about a closing, normally when you buy a house it's one-on-one. You ride past that development, you see 7 individuals investors. You imagine how long it takes you to put together 7 individual investors. Typically it's one-on-one. You go to the table, you bring your check, purchase the asset, you move on. That development is 7 investors. So I think at the end of the day, by having these conversations and understanding where you want to go, they alluded to 830G. Why would you have a developer come in and put up a facility where you don't want it? By having these conversations, you get an opportunity to decide where do they go? How do you want them to look? What are the requirements for? And I think that's extremely important. When you can do that, you come out with very successful projects. When we went to Old Saybrook 20 years ago, we had all of these fears. The night that we went for approval, We didn't have one objection. Not one person in the room objected to that development. The young lady that objected, she wanted sewer requirement or baseball field, something like that, something weird. But it went straight through with no objection. And I think that came from education, from working with the town, working with all your leaders, working with your community. And it starts by having a meeting like this. You have a charrette, invite people in. What would you like to see? What would you like for it to be? How would you like for it to look? David and I has traveled this state having these conversations. David and I started on the Partnership of Strong Communities 15 years ago. Today, I serve as the chairman of the board for the Partnership of Strong Communities. And we are advocate group. We advocate for housing throughout the whole state of Connecticut, not necessarily in Middlesex or New Haven County, Litchfield County, Wyndham County, the whole state. Because we firmly believe that everyone should have a home. Everyone should have a safe home. Everyone should feel comfortable in their home. And everyone, community-wide, should believe that we all are equal. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, extremely important. And if you believe that, you'll come out with a successful project in the town of Madison. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one or two more. Yes, sir.
Roger Marlowe.
Hi, Roger.
I've lived here since 2005. We've traveled the country a lot.
Yeah.
How do you build affordable housing when the cost of building a house, the square footage, is so expensive?
Mhm.
So how do you get a cheap rent?
Got it. Is that a question?
How do you balance that out? If you, I mean, you can't, labor's labor.
Right.
Materials are materials. So how do you build at a normal cost per square foot and get a low rent? Somebody's
So
got.
I can, sure, I can answer it for you. You know, like I said about Mark Twain and creating land, if you can put more units on the acre.
We don't have sewer systems here.
Well, I understand. There are, the technology has expanded. You have sewers, I gather, on Route 1, and there's certain areas, not at all. Okay, so.
It's all septic.
No, I understand. There are technologies that have come a long way. It's not a slam dunk. It really is site specific. There are people here who are more expert on engineering than I, who can tell you essentially that it depends which way the water flows, and it depends whether there's sandy soil or clay soil but it's possible, it's doable. There are towns that are doing it, but again, you know, one site, one parcel, you may be able to do it on, and the one right next door, you might not be able to do it on. So it's possible to do it. If you can do it, you put as much density as you can. I recommend to towns, especially that don't have a lot of income restricted housing, to do mixed income housing where you make only 10 or 20% of the units income restricted. And in a town like this, market rate units that are rentals, as I think Mr. Chamberlain said, are going to command a lot of money, a lot of good rent, because there's not enough supply. And a developer will make enough on the market rate units to be able to eat whatever costs he has to on the income restricted units. So
there's
mixed
no
income.
taxpayer money that goes to subsidize that.
Well, it's been done in a bunch of places where taxpayers haven't had to. In Old Saybrook, as Cal was talking about, I'm sorry?
No, we, with this project, we gave a tax abatement to the project, the town did.
But you give nothing to seniors.
Well, we do have a senior
No,
tax.
it's
we do have a
based on
senior
your
tax
income.
relief. Oh, okay.
It's not based on like these. We don't get a break.
So this project went through a process, and it was approved in the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and the town meeting granted a tax abatement because we have so little affordable income restricted housing in Madison. So this project in particular.
So they're getting a lower.
I'm sorry. Please finish.
So, so the development, the project, it's a rental facility. And yes, they get a tax abatement. So the property owners will get a tax abatement for a period of years. They have multiple financing sources. They're dealing with state funding as well as investors, and then the town partnered with them to make this happen.
So we've got 5 minutes left, and I want to give Jen and Peggy time for the last word. So I want to talk first a little bit about, I'm sorry?
Online for our Zoom.
Got it. I did not know this. Go ahead.
I can, I'll allow Alex to come through so you can see him on the screen. See him on the screen. He's gonna come over. Otherwise, I'll unmute. Alex, I've
Hi there.
unmuted you as well if you're unable to.
All right, we can hear you.
As a panelist.
Okay, sorry about that. I just didn't want to join as a panelist.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just, in case you want to be seen.
No, not tonight. So just on the couch. First and foremost, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Many compelling reasons why affordable housing is a great idea. I, however, am going to just raise a perspective of the environment. I'm slightly terrified in the sense that every day I read the paper, it's suggesting that we need more housing. One idea is we need 100,000 more units. They should go to where jobs are necessary. I understand seniors should not be displaced that have been in Madison their entire lives. I understand business owners are struggling with help, and there are so many reasons financially why this makes sense. However, if you consider Connecticut is the fourth most densely populated state in the country, we're part of the tri-state area. If you fly into LaGuardia or JFK and you look down, you just see houses. Every inch has been curated into housing or targets or stores or whatever. At some point, someone has to put the brakes on and say, the ground can't hold all the number one and number two and medications and detergents and shampoos. The trees need a place to live. We need contiguous nature to allow the indigenous animals and insects to live here. What kind of guardrails are we going to have in place? Because business owners want this, our seniors want this, people who are making money, realtors and bankers want this, architects want this, but who's going to speak up for the environment and say, we don't want Connecticut to look like New York, and many people are moving here from New York, so they're used to density, but we are part of New England and part of little by little. I've been here, by the way, Alex Province, 917 Boston Post Road. I've been here for nearly 50 years, and someone has to be an advocate for the environment. And I feel sorry to be speaking against such wonderful, good-hearted people in this room. But I just caution, we need some serious guardrails, whether they're moratoriums or, the town buying land, or, I'm sorry, I'm just putting my reading glasses, a tree ordinance. But I bet if I ask the room how many people are environmentalists or care about climate change, every single person is going to be raising their hand. Yet these two are not necessarily, friends of one another. Development is development, whatever you call it. Thank you very much for listening to my rant.
Thank you. Given the time, I imagine there are folks on the committee and government that want to respond to that. And I've written it down as a list of questions that I know that we're going to respond to on the website, in future meetings, in newsletters, et cetera. I would just say briefly point to the images of housing that we saw that do not to me at least, look anything like New York City, that I would personally contest the idea that development is development is development. I know a lot of people who work on developing housing who are very involved in environmental impact and mitigation. And I would put forward that there are ways to do both, but that is a really important consideration. And I think there are definitely plenty of housing advocates who do say develop every square inch and put, asphalt on everything. And there's a lot of people, myself included, who oppose that, for a lot of the reasons you say. So really appreciate that perspective. In closing, I imagine there are people who have questions that were not answered tonight. I would encourage you, housing committee members, could you raise your hand one more time so everybody knows who you are? If you have got a question that was not answered here tonight, please find one of these people before you leave. They will not answer it for you, but they will write it down, and we'll have a list so that we can respond, because this is one part of an ongoing process. Also, once again, want to encourage everyone who is interested, number one, to join the housing committee for that open meeting on Wednesday, March 20th at 3 p.m. And that's going to be here,
In the main.
here in the main room. And then everybody is welcome. From 3 to 4 is going to be specifically public conversation. Then their regular meeting starts at 4 o'clock, which you're welcome to stay for and observe and take part in. Also, if you are connected with a neighborhood organization, a church, a synagogue, a local group of any kind, and want to have a community conversation where we can keep this going with people who you live with, work with, play with, pray with, please let, again, any member of that committee know. We've been doing these all around town. We want to get as many people, as many voices, and as many perspectives as possible in the conversation. So we are happy to do that. Housing committee, any other next steps before we turn it over to Jen and Peggy to close us out?
I don't think so.
All right.
Can I make just one other thought? So
Go for it.
Scott Murphy, one of the selectmen here in town. Just in case people are uncomfortable and don't want to talk to, Anthony, who is slightly intimidating.
Oh, yeah, he's scary.
So maybe we put a list over here, and I'll write it down, just a list as you're walking out the room. If you want to write down your question anonymously, let's rock that too.
Let's do it. Love it. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you for coming. I also want to comment because there was a lot of questions about policy and what are we allowing? Who's getting tax abatements? The town has never been proactive on this issue. So we're reacting. So when a development comes into town, the board of selectmen is like, wow, this sounds great. We've had this tax abatement sitting here for decades. No one's applied for it. We don't have affordable housing. We have no guideposts, no roadmap from the community about what we want. And so the goal of this exercise, just like the strategic plan, was what does the community want? Give us some criteria. Let's get policies that the public is going to support. And that's what we're trying to do here. What can we do to planning and zoning to fix the problems that we have right now with development? And what development do we want? So it's not that we're making these decisions on our own. We're saying we don't have any guideposts. We're trying to lead the town and set policy. And we need to hear from the public about what's acceptable. How do we serve you the best? And what policies do we put in place? So that's what our goal is. That's what the Affordable Housing Committee is. There's some recommendations in their plan. I encourage you to look at them. But then this all has to transition into policy and actions by the town government. And we want to know what you want from that. Do we want to have criteria for people? When we met with the Hope Partnership, we didn't even know what to think or what questions to ask because we never had it happen here because we had so few affordable housing projects come to this town. So we're going through a learning process too. And so that's why we want to have these conversations. And I want to hear these questions, but we need to hear from you. And so that's why it's really important to bring friends and neighbors again, to email us, to attend their meetings and just share your thoughts. So the more we hear from the public, the more we know what the public's looking for through this process.
And if you want us to stay in touch with you, please make sure your name and email address are on that sign-in sheet on the way out, as well as any anonymous questions that you may put in.
Right.
Just want to, thank you, Becky, but I just want to say one thing. The March 20th meeting is a general meeting, especially for you to have a voice in our conversation. However, all our meetings are public.
Yes.
So anytime you wish, we're on the first and third Wednesdays of each month. So 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Jen, last word.
And I just want everybody to know, thank you for coming tonight, because this is a really great crowd that's assembled. I also want everybody to know that there is no question that is right or wrong. There is no thought or feeling that is right or wrong. The point of this process, like Peggy said, is to help us as your town leaders, your boards and commissions, to create these guardrails, to create these discussion points and, policy and procedure that we are going to use to form and shape our affordable housing policies here within the town. And that could be, as Ben had mentioned, maybe there's an opportunity to say, like some other developments have, we want to give priority to seniors that are coming from Madison that are downsizing. We want to give priority to teachers or first responders and that sort of thing that are working in our community. And these are all things that we can then take and compare back against state rules, laws, regulations as they pertain to housing. So we want to hear it all. We want to hear the good, we want to hear the bad, we want to hear the ugly, because it's what's going to make us better with this whole process. So thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.